Hey guys, it's been quite a while since I've been here. I'm actually here to really update myself on the timeline, I guess, of Van Gogh letters. And so we're going to go to April 1890. There were only three letters written on that particular day, and we're going to only one of them was actually written by Vincent himself. We're going to go through those. And it's quite apparent that things have kind of changed for the worse in terms of Van Gogh. And so let's sort of just update ourselves on that. Okay, let's open this up. You may remember when we last dealt with Van Gogh letters, it was really hard to wade. There were so many letters, it was hard to wade through all of them. And so the volume has dropped precipitously. Now, let me just bring myself back for a second. One thing that kind of surprises me is if you'd asked me before I dealt with April and said, explain how Van Gogh left the asylum, I think I would have said something to the effect of, he mustered the wherewithal. He, what's another word for muster? He drew on incredible inner resources to get himself out of the asylum. And although I think that's true, I don't think that was happening in April. I think that actually happened earlier, and then when he continued to stay there, remember he was in the asylum for about a year, which is like being in a prison in some ways worse because you've got lunatics around you. But the bottom line being, he was putting on a brave face, he was mustering the wherewithal, all that kind of thing, and then he sort of took a turn for the worse, and he sort of kind of gave up. And you get that sense of him being defeated, him suffering, him being ill in these couple of letters we're going to deal with in April. Now, we haven't dealt with January, February, March, and if we do deal with them, we'll deal with them maybe next year in January or somewhere around there. Okay. Right, so let's get going with the first of these three letters. So this one's dated 29 March 1890. It's from his brother. Oh, sorry, we're not going to deal with this one. We're going to go to April. Yeah, so I mean, that's quite good to know. Theo wrote him on almost the last day of March, 29th of March, got no response for almost a month, more than 3 weeks, right? And then he writes to him again, like a follow-up letter, and he writes, from Paris, 23rd of April, which is 4 days behind where we are in the chronological timeline, right? He writes, your silence proves to us that you are still suffering, and I feel urgently impelled to tell you, my dear brother, that Joe and I suffer too, because we know you are ill. So what they're basically saying is, we are really worried about you. Are you okay? Then they say, oh, how happy we should be if we could do something for you that might give you solace. And so they're also offering at the same time, what can we do? Just tell us what we need to do to relieve your pain, kind of thing. Then Dr. Perrin writes us that we are not to be uneasy, and that this crisis, so something serious is going on, that this crisis, though it is lasting longer than the others, will pass off too. So at this time, Van Gogh is going through a lengthy crisis, right? He's struggling. And, it's something I say quite often. If there was a time for, if he was very desperate, very unhappy, very depressed, if there's a time for him to take his own life, it would be right here, right now. He's suffering the longest bout of whatever. He's not communicating, he's going through a real crisis. So, and he's like utterly alone. He's in this asylum. This would be the time to kind of give up, right? And yet he doesn't. In the middle of a very dark period, he silently sort of suffers through it. Then he says, Theo writes, if the distance were not so great, I should certainly have gone to see you. And I count on it that as soon as you feel the need for it, you will say the word, and I shall come at once. So these are pretty big pledges from his brother. You know, his brother supported him all along. What's different here is that Theo is now a married man, and not only is he a married man, he's a father, right? And so it's not actually that easy or that simple. Also, he's got other expenses to worry about if he's going to just drop it all and go and sort of tend to his brother. But you can see what's going on is they're very concerned, and as a result of their concern, they're basically making suggestions, and they kind of willing to back it with action, right? And so you see him say, you know, if the distance, if it wasn't so far, I would have gone to see you a long time ago. And you may remember when Van Gogh lost his ear, his brother came down almost immediately, but actually not to see his brother, to come and chaperone Gauguin, who was basically his client, back to Paris. Gauguin was sort of a bit down in his luck, and Theo basically paid for his train ticket back. That was the last time that the brothers saw each other. And so that's something like 18 months that they haven't seen each other. That's like a year and a half. Vincent has been in this asylum a full year, more than a year, without seeing his brother a single time. Meanwhile, his brothers traveled to their mother in the Netherlands and so on. So that's also got to sting a little bit, the fact that his brother hasn't even come to see him. And even in 1890, Paris isn't that far from Auvers. I mean, I traveled that distance there and back in November. Obviously, it's quick. It was quicker then, but it's really not that far. Anyway, so he goes on to say, you know, if you just say it, I shall come at once. Then he goes on to say, last week it was already a year since I got married. How time flies. We have every reason to be satisfied with this year. I do not forget that you insisted on my getting married. And this is something that the art critics probably need to think about. Is Theo, in his own words, said, you know what, you said to me, Vincent, you, my brother, said to me, I really think you should get married, because these art critics basically say one of the main reasons Van Gogh took his life was because his brother got married. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Anyway, and then he says, and you were right, for I'm much happier. It is true that my dear wife is not like everybody, and that I was marvelously lucky when I found her. We understand each other very well, and our home is pleasant. The little one particularly gives Joe a lot of work, but he's growing surprisingly. He is of nervous disposition, but very gentle. And so, yeah, he will stay awake for hours without crying. That a baby that does that is a pleasure. He's beginning to smile and to make sounds that must be the beginning of speaking. It would do you good to see him and play with him. It is our intention to pass the 2 holidays at Whitsuntide with Pissarro, who has invited us. He's going to London this summer to work there. So a colleague of theirs, basically another artist, is going from Paris to London. So it's not as though in 1890 people couldn't get around and didn't get around. So although Pissarro is going to Pissarro is going to London, Theo isn't going to Arles, which is, you know, just a couple of hours by train south. Then he says, your pictures at the exhibition are having a lot of success. The other day, Diaz stopped me in the street and said, give your brother my compliments and tell him that his pictures are highly remarkable. Monet, right? Monet is a contemporary of Van Gogh, said that your pictures were the best of all in the exhibition. Now, if that is true, that is an incredible compliment from an incredible artist. I mean, Monet and Van Gogh are some of the, I know Van Gogh isn't a French artist, but he obviously painted in France, and a lot of his paintings are in the Musée d'Orsay. I've actually seen them, Monet as well. And so for his contemporary to say that that is quite a compliment. A lot of other artists have spoken to me about them. Saray came to our house to see the other pictures, and he was enraptured. So one wonders whether Theo's laying it on a little bit thick. Is Theo being honest, or is Theo just trying to encourage his brother, or is it sort of a little bit of both? Then he says, he said that if he had no style of his own in which he could still express some things, he would change his course and go seek what you are seeking. Lozay is back. He was not able to call on you, for his mother and sister who lives in Marseille have come to stay with him. Now, if Van Gogh is reading that, that would probably fill him with disappointment. Wow, someone that's kind of a friend of mine was in the area and didn't actually come and say hello. He had to help them move, and he didn't have a penny to spend on a detour. Kind of an excuse there. My dear brother, remember that nothing in the world would give me greater pleasure than knowing you happy and in good health, and that every day I pray for your speedy recovery. Be courageous, and a cordial handshake from Joe and from your brother who loves you. Right? And at this time, Vincent was 37 years old. All right, so that's one letter. We've got two to go. I think we should maybe be done in about half an hour or less, 20 minutes or less. Okay. So now this is a letter from Vincent to his parents. So although he gets a letter from Theo on the 23rd of April, he doesn't write back to Theo immediately. Instead, he writes to, shouldn't actually be his parents because his father had died by this time, but he's writing to his mother and I guess his family, mother and sister. Basically the last day of the month. So in terms of chronological time, it would be around about this time plus 10 days or so, right? Of course, bear in mind it is, I mean, where I am, it's the end of summer. What do they call it? The dog days of summer. It's the very end of summer. Over there, and I guess where many of you are, it's the very end of winter, and spring is just starting to do its thing. Anyway, so he writes to his mother and sister after having been unwell for 2 months, right? Well, there you have it in his own words. He's not been well for 2 months. And here is a very good illustration, for the lack of a better word, for what happens to Van Gogh when he is unwell. Guess what? He doesn't paint. When he's unwell, when he's going through a very serious crisis, what happens? The art stops, right? And not only does his art stop, the letters stop. So in other words, when the crisis is severe enough, when his health and state of mind, everything is at a sufficiently low ebb, he's unable to paint and he's unable to write letters, right? Do you know that when he died, that wasn't the case? He was writing stacks of letters, he was painting stacks of paintings, and his health was apparently fine. You know, it wasn't like he complained of headaches or some kind of crisis he was going through, none of that. So anyway, then he says, until today, I've not been able to either to bring myself to read your letter or write one. So that's another thing that's going on. He doesn't even have the wherewithal to read a letter. And then he says, and the doctor not being at home today, I cannot get the letters and package you sent me. But in the meantime, I don't want to postpone thanking you both most heartily. With all my heart, I hope that all is well with you and also with Anna and Liz and their families. Now, can you see, he doesn't dwell, so let's bring that up a bit. He doesn't dwell on his own circumstances. He's not, even though he's gone through a terrible time, he's not full of self-pity, he's not full of reproach, he's not blaming anyone, he's not pleading or begging or whatever. He's basically fairly coming out of it in a fairly good frame of mind, right? So you can see he's got quite a resilient psychology. And he comes out of it, and one of the first things he says is, "Thank you. With all my heart, I hope all is well with you both." He's not prickly or pointing a finger. He's if anything, filled with gratitude. Then he says, "Today I wrote and sent him a number of pictures." Okay, so it seems like he did write to Theo. Maybe it's this letter. Yeah, okay, so he did write to Theo. Well, then this letter should actually be before that one. Anyway, so he says, "Today I wrote Theo and sent him a number of pictures, some of which I expect him to send on to you. So you see, I've not been able to work during the most favorable part of the spring." And that's really the bottom line. Is in his own words, he says, "I've not been able to work." Right? In other words, when he's going through it's common sense. When he's going through a sufficiently difficult period, a crisis, for the lack of a better word, excuse me, he's not able to work, right? Okay, so then he goes on to say, what makes it even worse is it's been the best part of spring and I've not been able to work. Now, I'm looking forward to being in France in about a week's time. I'm going back to France to see this most favorable part of spring. Remember, this was written on the 30th of April. I should be in France by that date. So I'll be showing you guys that. I'll be showing you the most favorable part of spring in France, show you what he's talking about. And he says, the reason I've not been able to work is things aren't going too well, right? So I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to say when things are going well, he's able to work by his own sort of admission, on his own account. Whereas when he is able to work, it stands to reason things are going well, right? Do you agree with that? And that's why I say, he was very prolific at the time of his death. He was painting a picture every single day, writing a letter almost every day, every second day. So were things not going well? I think anyone who's creative instinctually knows how to answer that question. Then he says, but what can a man do about it? Here he is kind of interrogating his own circumstances. He's saying, what can one do? He's kind of resigned to it. He says, every change is not a change for the better, but I'm longing to get away from here. What one has to endure here is hardly bearable. So that is, in a nutshell, kind of the crisis that he's going through. He's saying, I don't want to be here. I want to get away from here. So you would imagine that he's going to say to Theo, please, Theo, get me out of here. Although he voluntarily admitted himself, I don't think it's up to him to be released. Okay, so I've still got a bit of a cough. Okay, so he says, what one has to endure here is hardly bearable. So he's basically saying he has been enduring these circumstances and that they're hardly bearable. So he's basically saying what he's gone through here in the asylum has been very difficult, right? So again, that would be, if there's a time to give up, this is it. It's hardly bearable and it's very hard to endure, right? And then and he's longing to get out of here. So guess what happens? Literally a couple of weeks after this, Yvonne, good to see you. Literally something like 2 weeks after this, 3 weeks after this, Van Gogh is out of here, and he soon is quite happy, and things aren't hardly bearable anymore. Things are quite wonderful. Things are good. He starts meeting other people. He starts painting other scenes. He sees his brother. He visits them. He sees his nephews, also named Vincent. And so things have become a lot more bearable. So why on earth would he give up at that stage? Does that make sense? And no, I'm not in France now, Yvonne. Then he says, these last few days I've been working on the picture of a lawn in the blazing sun with yellow dandelions, right? So although he's struggling, he has actually been working a little bit. He's working a lot less, but he's not working at all. Then he says, I continued painting even when my illness was at its height, right? The difference here is that he painted less, not nothing, but he painted less. So let's just go back to what he says earlier. He says, first of all, he says, it is only now that I'm able to write you a letter. So one thing we can accept is that when he's going through a crisis, he doesn't write letters, but he can paint, right? He does say, I have not been able to work, right? I've not been able to work. It doesn't mean I haven't been able to work at all, just not as much as he's wanted to. Why? Because things aren't going well. Why? Because he's longing to get away from here. He's not happy where he is. He's looking for a change for the better. He's enduring what he says is hardly bearable. And he's done pretty well for a year in an asylum. I think he's done quite well. Anyway, then he says, I continued painting even when my illness was at its height, among other things, a memory of Brabant. Now, this is a indication, right? This is so important. When Van Gogh is unhappy, what does he paint? A memory. He's painting from his heart. He's not painting what is in front of him. He's painting something that is out of his history. In other words, and I mean, he says it here, I am longing, right? I want to be somewhere else. And one way that you go somewhere else, kind of in your mind, in your heart, is when you kind of, in a way, think about the past, think about happier times. When you kind of sort of say, well, remember that time when I was there, remember how happy that was. And now, where he is here is unbearable, so he's imagining he's somewhere else. He's imagining Brabant, right? And that's what he's painting. So when he's painting, it's a kind of escapism. Does that make sense? And then he says, hovels with moss-covered roofs and beech hedges on an autumn evening with a stormy sky, the sun setting amid ruddy clouds. This is what he's painting. That's a terrible copy of it. Let's see if I can get a better one. But the point is, by the way, Brabant is in the Netherlands as far as I know. Just make sure. Should know this. There's your confirmation. It's a historical and geographical region in the Low Countries divided between Belgium and the Netherlands. So it's in southern Holland. It's or north of France, between Belgium and the Netherlands, right? So that just gives you an idea where it is. But the point is, it's not in France whatsoever. And so let's just see if we can get a better. That's just such a terrible copy. See if we can get a better version of that. Well, I think this might be the best one. Some seem to have a yellow sun and some seem to have a red sun. Anyway, this is maybe the best copy that I can show you. You can sort of tell from this that it's a different vibe, I guess. The landscape looks and feels different to France. It will be cloudier, colder, wetter, muddier, right? All those things. But perhaps there's a excuse me. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough. There's probably a sense of community, knowing Dutch people and being accepted by the Dutch in ways that perhaps the French haven't or don't really accept him. And that is what he's sort of reaching out to. That's what he's sort of reminiscing over. So what does he do when he's unhappy? He reminisces, he thinks of home, family, happier times, right? And you can see that's a much better version than that one. There's also this one, which is I'm not sure if it's the same one or just I think it's the same picture. Or is this one like a yellow sun? Anyway, that one's called Thatched Cottages, and it's this painting is located in the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, America. This one is in a private collection. So they are different paintings. Anyway, we've confirmed that. Wow, it's interesting to see 10 people in chat. Good to see some of the class that are back here. Okay, so then he says, also a turnip field with women gathering green stuff in the snow. Where he says here, the sun setting amid ruddy clouds. You can imagine it's often overcast in the Netherlands, not so much in France. And so that's what he's just remembering, that the sunsets there, I guess. So anyway, then he also refers to this picture. And that also seems to be a sort of reminiscence of the Netherlands, arguably. Or do you think that is people digging in the snow? People digging in the snow in France? The description here seems to suggest it is France. It's a masterpiece depicting rural life in 19th century France. This work is a perfect example of post-impressionistic artistic style. So this picture is painted about 2 months before his death. It says here the inspiration for this painting came from his stay in a psychiatric hospital in Saint-Remy, where he observed patients working in the garden. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree that this is a scene in France. That is not what Saint-Remy looks like. It's not as flat as that. And it doesn't hearken to a lot of the other pictures we've seen there. Look at the sky. So, in my opinion, I don't know what you guys think. Amanda, thanks so much for gifting those memberships. What do you guys think? Do you think that that is France, or do you think that is also memories of Brabant or somewhere in the Netherlands? What do you guys think? I think a clue to the answer is in these structures here, right? In just these kind of the way these houses are designed. Note they sort of got a gable, and then also I don't know whether French peasants would tend to wear these sort of head coverings. I don't know. I just don't know. But it's kind of an interesting question. So that's kind of what he's painting, right? Talks about a turnip field with women gathering green stuff in the snow. But the point is just referred to. He's saying, among other things, a memory. And then he talks about of Brabant. And then he talks about hovels with moss-covered roofs, right? Then he says a turnip field with women gathering green, but in the background are kind of old cottages, right? And so if you look at these hovels in the background, right? Look at how steep these gables are, and you sort of have a steep, tallish roof, and then one that's sort of squatter next to it. And then in this field, you have something similar. Do you see that? So isn't this almost an expanded version of that? It's a sort of expanded perspective. So where someone is saying, wow, he was painting this in France, it's depicting a rural scene in France. I don't think it is. Because of his state of mind and because of what he said in his letter, right? I painted memories from Brabant, right? Then he says, I've asked Theo to let me have as many of my old drawings as he has kept. Do you happen to have any of my old studies and drawings at home? So can you see he's so sentimental in a sense, right? He's so sentimental in a sense that he's writing to his mother and saying, can you guys send me some of my drawings from home? It's almost like saying, can you send me a postcard from home, but it's actually something that I drew. It's almost like, can you send some of those photos I took of our garden? Can you send them to me, right? So he's really feeling sentimental. Maybe he's feeling homesick. Who wouldn't, right? And then he says, they may not be good in themselves. They may serve to refresh my memory. So that's kind of what he wants. He wants to remember. He's longing to not be where he is, and what is kind of giving him comfort is where he was, home. And he says, and these would be the subjects for new work, meaning, I would use these old drawings I did to paint new pictures of home. So that again gives kind of support to this idea that both those pictures are really from memory and from the Netherlands, not rural France. It's like he's like done with that part of France. And then he says, I should prefer quick sketches of peasant figures, but it is not important enough for you to rummage a long time to find them. So he's even considerate enough to say, look, do a quick search. If you can find it, I'd appreciate it, but don't go to a lot of trouble, right? Then he says, with all my heart, I hope you are both well, and before long I shall write more. Believe me, I often think of you. That is I think, quite sincere. Believe me, I'm often thinking of you. I embrace you in thought, your loving Vincent. I don't think he always signed his name like that. I think it was sometimes, not sure what it was before, but it wasn't always your loving Vincent. Let's just go back a couple of letters and see what he says. So this obviously to his brother. There's no sign off there. This was to his mother in February. Well, that's your loving Vincent. Interestingly, in February is when he sold his one and only painting to Miss Anna Bock. I think she was from Belgium. So yeah, they sold one of my pictures at Brussels for 400 francs. So think about it. This is like one of the greatest triumphs in his life, certainly in his artistic life. He sells a picture in February, and then March, April, he goes through this crisis. He's going through this horrible time, right? Yeah, you're right, Yvonne. He did often sign it with a handshake. Just wondering how far one's got to go back to when he says that. To his sister, he says, yours, Vincent. That's February. To Albert Aurea, he says, well, there's no signature there. To Theo, he says, ever yours, Vincent. So it's not a given that he signs your loving Vincent. That's something he did towards the end of his life. Do you agree with that, Yvonne? Like your loving Vincent was something that he did really in the last 2-3 months. I don't know if he did that before that. And the reason I feel like I know that is because there's a documentary where they have him narrate, and then he says, your loving Vincent, and then loving Vincent appears on the screen. And I was thinking, where does he say that? And the answer is, well, here. Okay, so that's the end of this letter. And then there's a postscript where he says, as soon as I heard that my work was having some success, and now we know what he's talking about, that he sold that picture in February. He says, and read the article in question. Guess what? Not only has someone bought one of his pictures, the Red Vineyard, but someone has reviewed his work. It's appeared as a review, and a positive review. He says, I feared at once I should be punished for it. Right? And that tells you a little bit about, in a way, he's a very tough character, but he's also quite fragile in terms of his self-esteem, I guess, in a way. So he says, as soon as I sort of crossed the finish line where I was actually having some success, suddenly he feels this sort of vertigo of, wow, what is going to happen now? And then he says, I feared I would be punished for it. And then he kind of was. He was really ill for 2 months after that. Just think about how unsettling and destabilizing that is. This painter's been painting for years, finally sells a painting. This painter's painting for years, suddenly has someone come out the woodwork and write a review. You didn't even ask the guy, and it's a positive review. And then on the other side of that, like immediately after that, where he should be celebrating and doing handstands and cartwheels and like, woohoo, and like, great, I think I'm ready to come out the asylum and start my life. Instead of that happening, he becomes ill and things really go south. And I think what that shows is his illness isn't psychological. It's not depression. It's not how can I put it? It's not, yeah, it's not psychological, it's not mental health that's the issue here. And I mean, he's in an asylum, for goodness sake, where people have mental health problems. He doesn't actually have mental health problems. He's a very resilient dude. The problem is he's got syphilis, in my opinion. And so the syphilis is just going on its own course. And you might say, well, if he had syphilis, why did they release him from hospital? Well, bear in mind his own brother would be dead in terms of this time of the year, about 7-8 months from here. His own brother would be dead 8 months later. So the syphilis is kind of going its own course, and it's basically a bacterial infection. If you rest enough, you eat a good diet, you can overcome it. If your lifestyle is such and your diet is poor and so on, it's going to overcome you, and that's literally what happened. Yvonne says, because past reviews were never too good, but he would stand up for himself and his work. Okay, so you can see there's when he says, I feared at once that I should be punished for it, there's I don't know what one can call it, an intuitive sense of fate. There's a gut feeling that something is brewing, that it's like a pattern, right, in the tea leaves. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows that it's happening. And he was absolutely right. And so he did have some success, and he was punished for it, right? And then when he leaves the asylum, he's going to go through this incredible period, right? And we're about to go into that period of the timeline, May, June, July. May, not that much happens. It's basically how he gets out of the asylum and gets to Auvers and all the arrangements he makes. But at the end of May, he arrives in Auvers-sur-Oise. It's a little enclave north of Paris. That is where he arguably has the greatest success of his entire career. That's where he paints the portrait of Dr. Gachet. That's where he paints Wheatfield with Crows. That's where he paints the Catholic Church that's so well known. That's where he paints just trying to think, I think it's something Wheatfield under stormy skies, but so many iconic works of his. I probably got 3 or 4 of them hanging in my bedroom, not the originals, of course, just copies. But some of his best art was produced in that 2-month period. And then look at what he says. As soon as I heard my work was having some success, I feared at once I should be punished for it. And that pattern does seem to repeat itself. So whether he was punished by fate, by health, poor health, or punished by, when I say fate, it's like, how did he end up dead through a bullet wound? How did that happen? Well, whatever your answer is, he seemed to be punished for this incredibly prolific period in the last 2 months of his life. Here he is, in a way, predicting his own end, right? And then he says, this is how things nearly always go in a painter's life. This is also so portentous. He's making a prediction here. Yvonne, there's a lot of talk that the tree root paintings were painted the day he died. I don't really believe that. In fact, I actually don't think it matters which picture he painted the day he died, because it's not like it's I don't want to say the word, but you know what I mean, the something note. It's not like that note. And people are trying to make it that be the case. And that's why in the movie, what is it called? Lust for Life, they made this they made Wheatfield with crows very dramatic. You know, he's out in this field all alone, and suddenly these birds fly out, and they even like assault him. These black birds sort of fly against him, and he's sort of going like this, and they making this loud cawing noises like ah, you know, and it's like he's suffering this mental breakdown because of these birds flying out of the field. In other words, they're trying to make the case that the art is like a cry for help, or the art is speaking about his inner turmoil. And I'm not saying it wasn't at all. I'm just saying it's not a you know what note. So it doesn't really matter what painting he was painting, because he's not saying that in his art. If he wanted to say that, he would have done it like he did here. He would have painted a scene from Brabant that kind of looks like this, right? There's like a red sun. Maybe a red sun means I'm suffering, I'm going through a crisis. Maybe blue peasants means I'm feeling a little blue. There's again like kind of a red sun. The sun is setting on my life. Are the tree roots a sign that I'm thinking about worms and death? I don't think so. Because the problem is, in this letter, he talks about, he's able to say, I've been suffering, I've been having a hard time, I've been struggling, right? Let's just go through it. He says, it's hardly bearable. You know, I'm trying to endure this. I am longing, right? He talks about, with all my heart, I hope this. He says, I've been not able to bring myself to do this or that. I went to the doctor, right? So it's not like he can't admit when he's going through something. So why doesn't he admit in any letter that he wrote then what he was going through, right? So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense what I've just said, but I think it's quite an interesting point. And then we go to the letter to Theo, which is significantly longer than to his parents. The root painting was one of the last ones. In fact, it's actually made the news quite recently. Let me see if I can show it you quickly. It's made the news in the sense that people have been arguing about whose property that belongs to. So yeah, this is not the article I'm really looking for. Is it gonna let me? Log in. So yeah, this is not the article, but this is the routes that are basically there, right? And you can see that's like along the side of the road, and then this is the painting. And the part that I always look out for is, I think it's that part, sort of like a square, right? And then there's also that. Now, can you see that and that sort of square here? Not sure if one can. You can see it kind of goes like that, and then it's kind of like a box, right? And then there's like a fork on the other side. So over here, there seems to be a fork. There seems to be a fork as well. So kind of hard to say exactly what he's painting, but this is what it appears to be. Just remember, this is almost 100 years since he painted it. But basically, there's been literally legal fighting between the property owners who own the garden that terminates in these routes. There's a road that goes alongside the route, and then the mayor of the town who wants to make it like a official tourist attraction. Let me just see if I can find the article. I now read it. Van Gogh routes, legal mayor owner. I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to view this. Okay, well, there it is. Well, there you have it. French mayor loses bid to snatch scene of Van Gogh painting from village's back garden, right? And then there's also this. Site of Van Gogh's final painting will remain in private hands. This is from literally a few weeks ago, April 3rd, 2025. And so it says here, can you guys read that? It says, legal conflicts over real estate are routine. It's not every day, though, that such a conflict has at its center a tiny patch of land that plays an outsized role in art history. But the scrubby expanse in the back garden of 48 Rue d'Aubigny in Auvers-sur-Oise happens to be the subject of Tree Roots 1890. And then they say, which is likely the last painting by one of art history's most beloved painters, Vincent van Gogh. I don't think that's true. I don't think it is the last painting, and I don't think it's likely the last painting. I would write here, which is likely one of the last paintings. I think as soon as you say it's the last painting, suddenly everyone goes nuts. Remember, it's going to be the 100-year anniversary of his death in 5 years. So, you know, if you can turn this into the last painting ever painted, it suddenly achieves incredible symbolic value and meaning and all that kind of thing. Think about it. It's the year 2025, and suddenly people are going nuts about these tree roots. Why? Why now? Mayor Isabelle Miseres and Jean-Francois and Helene Serlinger, the owners of the land in the riverside village that's Auvers-sur-Oise, where the Dutch artist lived, have been in a 5-year legal feud after the municipality tried to take the land, claiming it's part of a public highway, right? There again, you can see this thing that sort of looks like a box with like a fork on the other side. Anyway, so this is the article sort of talking about that. There is a postcard that has been colorized, and there's that area. Now, does this look like a public highway? It certainly is a road, right? So how the story goes is Van Gogh got up, came here, painted these roots, felt miserable, went home and died. But actually, he didn't. He died some distance away from home and had to stumble back home, and the gun was never found. It's a little bit different to that. Also, he was shot like Charles Vallot through the abdomen, except the bullet didn't come out his shoulder, it lodged into his spine, and I think it bounced around his ribs and so on. The painting hangs today in the Van Gogh Museum. It was unfinished. So if you want to make the claim that it was the last painting, well, he didn't even finish it. You could say, well, it's the last painting because it wasn't finished, but he had other paintings that weren't finished. Could almost be mistaken for a jumble of bright colors. Now, if you ask me, this to me doesn't look ominous and depressing. I don't look at that and think someone is, it's about the roots of your mind and going to dark places. I mean, it's quite a bright translation of that. I mean, if you wanted to make a dark, ominous picture, you would paint it the way you see it. You'd make it black and white and gray and brown and dark green, right? You make it very black. Instead, his is very bright, right? Where it's supposed to be black, it's sort of bright yellow, right? So to me, is not seeing this in the mind of a madman or someone who's in despair. I mean, look at that. That almost looks like it's a skull over there, and this looks like eyes and a mouth, right? And like if you were looking at that and you were like, let's do the ghoulish version of this. Let's do what's it? What's that celebration? Let's do like the Halloween version of this picture. I don't think you would make it look like that. I mean, do you see any skulls or things there? It's just not seen there, right? I'm glad you agree, Yvonne. Hazel Eyes, thanks for joining us. So I just want to sort of let you know that this picture and this legal battle has literally been going on this month in 2025. That's how current it is. So I'm hoping to go there myself and take a picture and give you a better sense of what this looks like. I can already tell you that it's not gonna, you can't like just walk by there and, oh, there it is, and you know, it's not going to be a nondescript scene. There's going to be kind of scaffolding there. There's going to be what can one call, you know, like when someone when a building is being renovated or a building is being cleaned or something, then they often have netting and all sorts of boards surrounding a building. I think it's going to have that sort of effect. It's going to be like a stage and an artificial thing surrounding this, some kind of structure. Anyway, what does give some authority to the idea that this could have been his last painting is Andries Bonga, the brother-in-law of Vincent's brother Theo, in other words, Joe's brother, said the morning before his death, he had painted the forest scene full of sun and life. Now, I don't know whether is that a forest scene? Is tree roots a forest scene? I suppose you could say it is, but wouldn't you say tree roots? It's called tree roots, not called forest scene. And he did paint forest scenes in Auvers. When you come out the station, one of the first things you see is a beautiful poplar forest drenched in sunshine. So people are going nuts about this particular site. The roots belong to the people of Auvers. Unbelievable, but true. We are taking legal action. These roots are common good, not a commercial object, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of argy-bargy just on who can claim ownership of this, because whoever does can stand to make money out of it, right? Okay, so one thing we want to look at when we deal with July 1890, you know, in the last days of his life, is what does he say about what he was painting? And does he say, I've been having this incredible headache and I've just been imagining like roots burrowing through my mind and spitting my skull? Does he say anything like that? Okay, so let's deal with this letter. He says, my dear Theo, until now I've not been able to write you, but being a bit better just now, I did not wish to delay wishing you a happy year. So when does Vincent write his brother? Because it's his birthday. That's really why he breaks his silence. He's like, okay, I've been suffering and struggling, but I need to get over it now because it's Theo's birthday and Theo's been this benefactor, and I owe him a letter, right? But he's honest. He says, I've not been able to write to you, but he says, because I'm a bit better, I'm going to write to you, right? So when he's not well, he doesn't write. So what do you think happened in the days leading up to Van Gogh's death? Do you think there were days he didn't write letters? That's one of the busiest months in his entire life for letter writing. Does he write anything about how miserable he is, how depressed he is, how unhappy he is, how much he's despairing? No. Anyway, he says, at the same time, I beg you to accept the various pictures I'm sending you. He doesn't say, I beg you, get me out of here. I beg you, come and visit me. I beg you, can you send me an extra bottle of wine or whatever? You know, he says, please accept these pictures I'm sending you. And then he says, thanks for all your kindness. He's not like, you SOB, you bastard, like you having this great time with your wife while I'm rotting in this asylum. None of that, right? Why? Because he's a resilient soul. He's a psychologically strong person. And then he says, with my thanks for all the kindness you have shown me. So on his brother's birthday, he says, thank you, thank you, thank you. He's not blaming him. He's not accusing him. He's not complaining. He's not making excuses. And then he says, you will see that, first of all, there are canvases after melee. So that's the other thing that he paints when he's not really happy. He doesn't paint what's in front of him. He paints other things. So memories and then scenes from melee, right? Such as, so there's another one that he painted that's a reminiscence, right? So this one here. That's the third picture now that he's painted during this period where he's pining for life away from where he is. And he even names it that. He calls it Reminiscence of the North, right? Not the north of France, arguably Brabant or somewhere in the Netherlands, right? You can see how emotional the sky is. It's almost like there's some heartbreak in the sky of this picture and that other one, right? I'm just trying to see if there's a Malay here. When did he paint this one? Got a feeling he painted this many years ago, not when he was in the asylum. Anyway, so he says, not being intended for the public, perhaps you will eventually make presents of these to our sisters, but first you must keep what you like as much as you want. It's yours absolutely. So in a sense, these are birthday gifts. Although he's been suffering, he still has the wherewithal to be a considerate brother, to think about giving the one thing that he can give to his brother, a painting, as like a birthday gift. And he says, one of these days you will send me something else to do by past or present artists, if you can find anything. The rest of the canvases aren't much, not having been able to work for 2 months. So there he confirms or reinforces what he said to his mother and sister. You know, I haven't been able to work, right? So when he's unhappy, struggling, going through a crisis, he can't work, he can't paint, he can't write. Was that going on in June and July? Answer, no. Well said. Doesn't hold grudges. He says, I'm very much behind. You will find that the olives with the pink sky are the best. So that's a picture, I guess, he's painted perhaps quite recently. And he says, and the mountains, I imagine, the first would go well as a pendant to those with the yellow sky. Okay. As for the portrait of the Arlésienne, you know, I've promised a copy of it to our friend Gauguin. And I mean, talking about he doesn't hold grudges, he still refers to our friend Gauguin. And you must send it to him. Then the cypresses are for Monsieur Aurier. I should have liked to do them again with a little less impasto, but I haven't time. They must get several washes with cold water, then a strong varnish when the impastos are thoroughly dry. Now think about how matter of fact he is. He's not saying the food here is terrible. You know what? There's a guy next door. He just won't stop screaming. He doesn't. He's not really stuck in his everyday life complaining. He is very much caught up in, as unhappy as he is, still caught up in the excitement, the stirrings of his art. You know, that is what keeps him going. And that is what Dr. Gachet said to him, when he came to Arles, Dr. Gachet said, you know what I think you need? You need to work. And I think he was right. Like work is the best medicine in a sense. Then he says, and then the blacks will not become dirty looking when the oil is evaporated. In the meantime, I shall of course want paints, which you might get again in part from Tanguy, if he is hard up or if he should like it. But of course, he mustn't be more expensive than the other one. Then he says, here is the list of colors I want. And so he wants 12 tubes of zinc white, crimson lake, emerald green, orange lead, cobalt, three tubes of cobalt, 5 malachite green, and so on and so on. He says, then, but at Tassay's 2 geranium lake, medium-sized tubes, you would do me a kindness if you sent me at least half of them at once, because I've wasted too much time. So that is kind of how he's feeling. I've wasted time. I need to do something. Then he says, what am I to say about these last 2 months? So if you want a diagnosis, here it is. Here is Van Gogh diagnosing himself, explaining kind of what has been happening to him. He says things didn't go well at all. So there again, is he someone who, he can transcend his circumstances, but it's not as though he forces the issue where, like, I'm not gonna acknowledge what I'm going through. He's not in denial. He's not lying. He's not covering it up. He's not pretending. He is able to take it on the chin, but he's also able to communicate it in quite a matter-of-fact way. He doesn't say, I'm suffering so much, please help me. He says, things didn't go well, right? And look at how he describes it here. He says, I am sadder than I can say, right? He doesn't say, I'm depressed or I'm miserable. He's just saying, I'm sadder than I can say. I'm not very happy. Does that mean he's got mental health problems? How happy would you be if you're not mad and you're in a madhouse for a year while your family are, one brother's gone overseas, another one has gotten married and had a child, and you sitting like a loser in a madhouse? You've missed out on the World Fair. You've missed out on a year of your life, right? Just when things were supposed to be amazing, they've been horrible. And so I think it makes absolute sense that he's sadder than he can say, right? He's missing an ear as well. And then he also says, I'm more wretched than I can say, right? That's something else, to say I'm more wretched than I can say. It's a little bit different. It's kind of like I'm a bit of a broken person. I don't have any money. I don't know where to start. I've been sick for so long. And that's also, like he's lost an ear. He must be feeling quite wretched. He must be, it's like he's just come through a long winter. He must be feeling kind of very unsure. Like, what do I do now? What am I supposed to do now? Right? It's spring and summer is about to come here. And then he says, this is the bottom line. Yeah, as Yvonne says, so many personal disappointments. But this is the bottom line. I don't know where I have got to. What do you think he means there? Do you think he means, I don't know how I got here? Or do you think he means, I don't know where to go? sorry, I had the sound off. Let me just say that again. So, so he says things didn't go well and I'm sad, and then he jumps to the next topic, and then he returns to that again while I was ill, right? Right. So you can see it's almost like he's trying not to be, I don't want to say self-indulgent, but he's trying not to feel sorry for himself. And he isn't. He just says, while I was ill, I nevertheless did some little canvases from memory. There again is confirmation that when he's ill, when things aren't going well, think about it. When things aren't going well and is ill, he probably can't sort of go out. He probably can't, go for a walk into the field and paint, right? So he does what he can do, and so he paints from memory, right? So in other words, when he's painting from memory, that's a symptom that he could be ill. That he and what does he paint from memory? He doesn't paint the potato eaters. He doesn't paint graveyards. He doesn't paint a church like, forgive me, Father, for my sins. He paints things that give him kind of a sense of joy. Remember that day that I was in that countryside, right? And then he says, memories of the North, right? He doesn't say, I'm just painting canvases from memory. I'm not painting the yellow house. I'm going back home in my mind, right? Memories of the North. And now I've just finished a corner of a sunny meadow, which I think is fairly vigorous. You will see it soon. So this is definitely a picture from the asylum. And I can tell you that because I've been there. I've walked down this road, and when you go to the asylum, the road is slightly elevated, and you do have these trees planted in this sort of fashion around it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can show you what I mean. Let's just see outside of. See if I can quickly summon up a picture. The closest I've got to what is painted there is probably this picture. Probably this picture. So when you go to the asylum, you literally see this board next to the road, right? And you can see there are trees just sort of growing sort of downwards in like a kind of a depression. And there's quite a big stem over here. And look at the stem over there. Look at that, and look at that. There's a path. There's the path. Then there's also this one. Just slightly different, but again, you've got those pine trees over there. I think the path is sort of here. You see what he's doing. So I'm just saying, without even seeing that title, I recognize that this isn't a memory from home, right? This is definitely something he painted outside his front door. This is really not far from his room. Like literally, I've gone into Van Gogh's bedroom where he painted Starry Night. The walk from there to where this scene was painted is 2 to 3 minutes, if that, might even be 2 minutes. It's really not far. Okay. Yeah, I actually think that's quite a nice picture as well. And then he says, Monsieur Peyron, being aware I've not yet read my letters, and I know that some have come. He has been good enough to keep you posted of the situation. I do not know myself what to do or what to think, but I greatly wish to leave this house. So he's basically saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I must think. I don't know what the best course of action is. All I know is I really want to leave here, right? And he would in about 3 weeks after this letter. You kind of get the feeling that at this point Theo kind of finally woke up, where Theo was like, sure, we got to get him out of there. Like things are bad. You know, we need to sort out the situation. It's almost like Theo disappeared for a while. He was sort of available, but he was distracted. Understandably, he got married. His wife had a child. And now things have settled down enough, and he's had another birthday, and suddenly he's realized, Cheap is my brother. We need to do something about this, right? This is urgent. And so this is the bottom line. You know, I really want to leave here. It's funny, it's saying YouTube doesn't want to publish this. Anyway, he's saying, I really want to leave this house. I really want to leave the asylum. And he says, that's not going to be a surprise to you. And he says, I don't actually need to say any more than that. So he's not saying, please, I beg you, I just can't do it anymore. He's just saying, you know what, I really do want to leave here. And then he leaves it at that, and he goes on. And he says, letters from home have come too, which I've not yet had the courage to read. I feel so melancholy. Right? So again, he does have the ability to say, I'm not feeling very happy. This is what I want. Right? It's not like he's so mentally strong that he's gonna hide it away or keep it secret. He's able to say, this is how I feel. Then he says, please ask Monsieur Aurea not to write any more articles on my painting. Insist upon this, that to begin with, he is mistaken about me, since I'm too overwhelmed with grief to be able to face publicity. So here he is, I don't want to say laying it on a bit thick, but he's certainly making it clear that he's suffering. You know, I feel so melancholy, I'm overwhelmed with grief. He says, making pictures distracts me, but if I hear them spoken of, it pains me more than he knows. And then he moves on. He doesn't go on and say, Theo, I expect you to help me. You've helped me so much. Please help me now. He lets it go. And then he says, how is Bernard? Are there, he says, as there are some canvases in duplicate, if you like, you can exchange with them for a good canvas by him. That would be a fine thing to have in your collection. Then he says, I felt ill at the time I was doing the almond blossoms. But he says this kind of matter of fact. He doesn't say, I was so sick, I couldn't stand. I was dizzy, I was falling all over the place. Please, you've got to get me out of here. He just says, you know what, when I did the almond blossoms, I wasn't feeling so great. if I'd been able to go on working, you can judge from it that I would have done others of trees in blossom. And this is what he means by what he said to his mother, where he said, I missed the most favorable time of the year. In other words, when all these trees were blossoming, and it doesn't last very long. It can sometimes be, what is it, a week, half, a couple of days to a week. And I must say, I actually watched TV coverage of I think it's called the Tour of Flanders or something. Or it wasn't Paris-Roubaix, but it was some other cycle race in the Netherlands, and you could actually see the trees blossoming there. So I think possibly a lot of the spring blossoms are already over in Europe. Then he says, now the trees in blossom are almost over. Really, I have no luck. You can imagine for an artist that is a little disappointing. I'm a little bit disappointed, as a photographer, when you get the timing wrong. Then he says, yes, I must try to get out of here, but where to go? I do not think I could be more shut up and more of a prisoner in the homes where they do not pretend to leave you free, such as at Charenton or Monteverg. I'm not quite sure how to say that. But that's how he's feeling. He's feeling shut up, right? And he's feeling like a prisoner. But the problem is like, I know I don't want to be here, but where do I go? I feel like I know I need to get out of here, but the problem is there's something wrong with me, and I can't just go back to work somewhere. And so that's the kind of conundrum he's in. And so his brother's got to figure out where can he go that is friendlier, happier, more conducive to health, but there's also a doctor on standby, right? Then he says, if you write home, give them my kindest regards and tell them I often think of them. You can see there's far more self-disclosure, there's far more private information being conveyed here to his brother. You can see that they've got a much more honest relationship, and it's a more transparent relationship than his relationship with his mother and sister. Anyway, then he says, I often think of them. They're a good handshake. There you go, Yvonne. A good handshake for you and Joe, and believe me, ever yours, Vincent. Then postscript. Please send what you can find of figure among my old drawings. I'm thinking of doing the picture of peasants at dinner. So again, this is him feeling homesick. When he's upset, and here he said it, he's homesick, his melancholy, is overwhelmed, he's grieving. How does he soothe those feelings? How does he feel better? Well, at the moment, with memories of home. And so he wants to paint the potato eaters again. He says that canvas must be quite black now. Perhaps I could do it again altogether from memory. Again, he's trying to go into his memories of home to escape where he is. That's like, for him, the only way to escape where he is. While he paints these memories from home, the moments, impulses, glimpses where it feels like he's not there. Then he says, you must send me the woman gleaning and the diggers if they're still there. Then, if you like, I will do the old Tower of Newnan again and the cottage. All of this stuff is from home. All of this is sentimental. Sorry, it's this one. All of this is sentimental stuff. It's all stuff from somewhere else. So again, when he's unhappy, this is the kind of thing he wants to paint. Now, if he painted this, does this mean he wants to die? No, it means it's actually a pleasant memory he has of a better time, even though to us it looks quite gloomy. Look at these gray skies and the birds and so on. If you look at this cottage, he's saying, I'm thinking about the dusk of my life. The sun is setting on my life. Is that what's been communicated? These trees are dying, and this is the darkness is descending on my life. No, this is actually a happy memory he has of home. All of this is, your capacity to correctly interpret Van Gogh depends on how well you know him. And my feeling, I don't know what you guys think, is that most of the art experts don't know him. They basically just project onto him, I guess, their own shit, basically. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. This has been a lot longer than I thought for just 3 letters, but we did go into um, the those roots paintings. I'll be sure to get some video when I'm in Auvers of that spot and try and illustrate it a little bit better than they have here. So look out for that. I might even do, I'm just trying to think where I'll be in May. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing a Van Gogh letters from there, but you never know. We'll see. We'll see how things go, but the odds are I won't be. Thanks very much, Yvonne. Yvonne, I'm really glad to see you here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this analysis. We covered 3 letters, and these are the only letters he wrote in April. Like I say, in the second half of May, he started making arrangements, getting his furniture, getting his notebooks, getting this and that, to move to Auvers. Meanwhile, Theo was making arrangements as well. And so that is where I'm going to be taking photos and doing other things. So I'll try and share some of that on the members only channel here. So I hope you guys will find that illuminating, interesting, bringing all of what we're talking about here really to life. So I hope you're going to find that worthwhile. I'm also hoping to. Unfortunately, I'm actually still a little bit sick, so I feel like I've got just a couple of days to get well before a trip, and I'm a little bit concerned I'm not going to be. So in a weird way, I'm in Van Gogh's same position. It's like I want to get out of here as well. We've had just so much rain and cold. I want to get out of here, but it's like I'm actually not 100% well. What if I go there and I'm even less well? That's one wonders whether that was his concern as well. So anyway, food for thought. Thanks again, Yvonne. Yeah, I'll try and keep you guys in the loop with a couple of photos and whatnot. So yeah, okay. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Easter weekend or whatever you're doing, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.